behind these uprisings. I think this is a misguided way of thinking about the role of technology in social life and in political activism. More specifically, technology is not a cause, and activism is not monocausal. There is no one thing that caused a political outcome or caused people to engage in political activism. Technology should be seen as a tool. Technology is something that people use for particular purposes in particular settings. We need to understand it as it is used by people for different purposes in different ways. I think this is the direction in which the debate needs to move. My central point in this regard is that digital activism must be understood and indeed practiced as activism first and digital only second. Digital activism is activism insofar as it is oriented towards changing the world, and digital comes only second. It is one suite of tools that one can use to engage in activism, and often, of course, people use many different tools, some of them digital, some of them not. When we are trying to advance the intellectual understanding of what digital activism and what it means, and when we are trying to ask activists of a more or less digital persuasion to act more effectively, I think there are three questions we need to focus on. The first one is seemingly simple, which is what is it that people are trying to achieve? This is the first question of activism. If you are pursuing change in the world, what is the change that you seek? I think this is a necessary precondition for understanding digital activism, is understanding what are people trying to achieve. There are material differences between whether one is engaged in relatively moderate form of pressure group politics, trying to inch politicians one notch in one direction or another, or whether people are engaged in more radical forms of political protest and rebellions against oppressive regimes or in democratic societies. And different goals are advanced or not advanced by different technologies to different degrees. Secondly, we need to focus on who are these people then? Given that there is a particular group of activists, who are they? Who are they trying to organize? Who are already organized and involved? Again, there are substantial differences. If you are trying to organize the elderly against cuts in social services, you face one situation. You need to understand that situation in one way. You're trying to organize students against rises in tuition fees. That is a different situation. If you're trying to recruit people for more high-risk direct action, say try to stop a nuclear waste transport or some such, again, this is a different situation. We need to understand each of them in their own terms when we're trying to understand both activism and indeed digital activism. I think it's on the basis of these two questions, what are people trying to achieve? Who are these people, that one should then ask the third question, which is, which tools and technologies are they using? What are the consequences and how widely available and familiar are these tools, and who controls them? Different tools are available and familiar to different people. They have different affordances for politics and for political participation, and they're controlled by different people. If you are trying to pursue radical change in the world, and many radical activists are well aware of this, it is perhaps a dangerous thing to rely upon the very same tools that the rest of us can easily use for more moderate and socially accepted forms of activism and parliamentary politics. So one can use Facebook for a wide range of different things, but it was quite clearly, I think, demonstrated that there are limitations to what these supposedly freely available tools can be used for, such as when WikiLeaks tried to raise money during the recent brouhaha and found that PayPal refused to process donations to them. I think this is where we need to understand digital activism. We need to understand what people are trying to achieve. We need to understand who are these people, and on that basis we need to focus on what are the tools that they are using, what are the upsides and downsides of these tools given the particular circumstances under which they are being put to use, and who controls these tools, and how can they be further developed. All of these points are premised on this idea that digital activism is activism first, should be activism first, and digital only second. And I think it is by focusing on these questions that we can come to understand digital activism better intellectually, and indeed by focusing on these questions that activists who choose to rely partially on digital tools can come to pursue their ideals and their interests more effectively, and thus contribute to our democracy. Thank you.
internet, I do tech stuff. And I'm here to say that collectivism isn't always bad, because it isn't. Here's a Facebook group we created about 2 p.m. the afternoon after the UK election. I invited my friends, went to make a cup of tea, and 3,000 people had joined when they got back. Immediate mainstream press attention helped with that. The whole thing was over in about an hour because the parties had issued statements saying that forming a government would take at least the weekend, my job was done, the media and civic discourse was slightly better afterwards, and I could go to bed. If you're ever in the same position, I'd advise against creating a newsworthy Facebook group when you've not slept in 30 hours. But in this case, it was the right tool to nudge the media narrative forward. It was rolling news we were targeting. It wasn't flooding people's mailboxes, but it was a show of interest. It was collectivism in one of its purest forms. It matters what you use your chosen tool for. Some of the tools you use some of the tools are built by the people sitting next to you, and practice gets shared between the people in this room. But just as you share good practice with the person on your left and the person on your right, anything negative also impacts the person sitting in front of you and the person in the seat behind. This is a little website which shows just how much journalists cut and paste what they're sent in press releases. While we all bemoan that when it's from Migration Watch, is it really any better for journalism and democracy when it's from anyone else? We all know that getting a message out is hard, and picking the right message takes time and clarity, unlike that picture. That's even harder with the media hordes and the relentless ticking of the news cycle. There's no easy answer, but we do know that some of the current methods of what we are doing are going downhill fast, and there are problems ahead. 38 Degrees' explicit tactics and strategy currently takes collectivism to what I think is its self-destructive end. It's not engaged activism. It's not engaged anything. It's point, click, and, oh yes, please give 38 Degrees some money at the end of it. Their stated objective is to get as many people to send us letters as possible so they can write a press release. There's no denying that it currently works well for them. But here at ECF, at the gathering of the community, we shouldn't just care about them, and we shouldn't just care about now. The objective of this 38 Degrees campaign was the press release. When I sent this to 38 Degrees headquarters, it's addressed to somebody who isn't my MP. The start is Dear Insert MP Name. It doesn't have my name on it. It's not sent from a valid email address. 38 Degrees headquarters see a good thing because their counter went up by 1. They ignore any cost to democracy and any cost to engagement. And when 38 Degrees say publicly that 80% of their emails are customized, that does mean that 1 in every 5 messages is sent to Dear Insert MP Name. Is there anyone who doesn't quite see why some MPs might be getting a little upset by that? The problem isn't that it doesn't work. The problem is that it works for now. It's ill-informed one-click petitioning, masquerading as democracy, and giving all online engagement a bad name. But when it stops working, and it will stop working for MPs within the lifetime of this Parliament, only big organisations will be able to send certain types of online campaigns. Money will matter more than issues, and I'm convinced that is a very bad thing. Here is a very different view of MP campaigning, and you can see some of it. If you think that stopping a committed government plan to sell off the forest is hard, getting a private member's bill to be anything other than dead on arrival is even harder. Later and 1010 managed it using a highly engaged grassroots campaign, with email contacts all uniquely written through that form, and a page that switched to showing the right phone number to ring when email may not get there in time. It wasn't easy, and if a 38 Degrees campaign is the rough equivalent of extracting oil from tar sands, this is a semi-magical tree where the leaves are solar panels that generate electricity. Is there anyone in this room who thinks that atmospheric carbon dioxide is not going up? Just because we don't notice the external pollution from a bad campaign, it doesn't mean it didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences, irrespective of whether we acknowledge them or not. Sorry. The mass click-to-email strategy can look so attractive. Short-term measurable outcomes right now, yay! It's very tempting to do the campaigning equivalent of feeding a husky dog a large bag of sweets, to send lots of junk mail, and to do it because the campaign dog is looking at you with those big blue eyes. It'll be good for this campaign right now. But everyone who has ever been around a pet or a baby knows that if you put something in one end, it comes out the other. We need nuance. We need care. And we need to be able to see my slides. Whether or not you define activism as disturbing the present in service of the future, we should at least care that what we do in the present doesn't damage the future. It's looking hard enough already. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David, and when I'm not killing cats, I run 38 Degrees. I wanted to talk about good activism and bad activism, and not really focus so much on the tools by which they are done. I'll offer up the 38 Degrees definition of good activism. Activism is about people coming together, pooling their resources, their ideas to make change happen, and what matters is impact. Two kinds of impact. The first one is probably the one that more of us think of more of the time, and that's impact in the world, changing things, changing people's minds, stopping bad stuff happening, making good stuff happen. The second kind of impact we think is equally important, and that's impact on the people who are involved. But the experience of getting involved means that you have more skills and more inclination to get involved in the future as a result of taking part. So you leave a legacy of more people getting involved. That's to me what good activism is. Bad activism is activism that doesn't do those two things. As so many people have already said, whether the tools by which you do that are secondary, and really they should be judged in terms of those impacts. Was it good? Did it make change happen? Did it get more people involved? Did the people who got involved have a good experience, an empowering experience that means they'll get more involved in future? Now, I think the first thing to take on in the kind of critique of digital activism is that, does it always have to be bad? Because that is that kind of debate's out there. Now, I'd argue that the 38 Degrees campaign to stop the government selling off the forests worked by both those criteria. Over 500,000 people got involved in that campaign. It was driven initially by thousands of 38 Degrees members pooling their ideas and analysis to decide to launch the campaign, to work out what our demands would be. Over 500,000 people signed the petition. People engaged their MPs in their tens of thousands, personalising their emails, contacting them both before a key vote took place and asking them how to vote, and then contacting them again afterwards, challenging them on how they had voted or congratulating them on how they voted. The feedback from MPs, overwhelmingly that was transformative, that it changed things, that MPs felt under pressure, that their constituents were engaging them and holding them to account in a way that they'd just not seen on that scale before. People also pooled their resources financially to fund adverts for the campaign and to publicise the message unmediated in national newspapers. And they worked together to make stuff happen offline. They came up with designs for posters which we then shared and people could download so that they were popping up in woods all over the country. They organised walks and rallies with their local MPs to put pressure on them. Last weekend, people organised another round of walks in the woods, celebration walks, where hundreds of people in locations all over England just had a walk together to talk about why they'd won, why it was important, why it was great. It had an impact in the world. We weren't the only people working on forests, but we were definitely alongside the local groups that were already there, alongside the celebrities that waded in and the NGOs that got on board towards the end. We were instrumental in stopping a bad government policy. I thought that I'd read to you some of the messages we got from the activists who were involved afterwards to talk about that second really important kind of impact. Judith, the first time in my life I feel my protest, along with so many others, has been heard and acted upon. Ian, thank you for empowering so many people. Julie, it's great news and proves that if people unite for these causes, they can be won. I hope in the future this continues. The possibilities are endless. Well done, everyone. We got thousands and thousands of messages like that. And what they showed was not just people pleased it had worked, but people newly convinced and aware of their own capacity to influence events and feeling part of a community. Now, that happened online. It doesn't just happen online, but it can, and that's what's exciting. So I think that's the first part of the argument, but we need to be really confident about as people who use digital tools to organise activism, that it can be good. The second thing I think, though, that we need to think about is the ways in which digital tools offer particular exciting possibilities that mean we should be thinking particularly about when they are appropriate. And I thought I'd offer just a few. The first is it lowers entry costs. It means more people can get involved, not just in participating in a campaign, but in starting it up. That's exciting in two ways. The first is it just means more stuff is happening, more things are springing up. The second is it's challenged. It lays down a challenge to existing players to be more responsive, to engage with their memberships, to listen to them. Because if they don't, their membership will start doing stuff anyway, and they've got competitors on their hands. That stirs things up. It makes people more accountable. Secondly, digital tools, I think we are seeing at the moment, are enabling existing activists to talk beyond the activist bubble, to spread the word with their non-activist friends via Facebook, by pressing forward on email, in a way that means you're sharing your political identity beyond just your political contacts. I think lots of us who are activists have had that experience of having our activist friends and our normal friends. That breaks down online, and that's really important because for progressive social campaigning, our roots were in struggles in campaigns that grew out of existing broader social relationships, the workplace, the community. And the existence of digital tools allows that to happen in a modern society where we don't all know our neighbours and we don't all work in factories. And that is really exciting. Thirdly, there's something about speed and scale of movement that you can accomplish online, which at its simplest is about the fact you can get an email out really quickly. But at its most exciting is about being able, as 38 Degrees does, and an increasing number of organisations do, to take decisions collectively really quickly, to pool ideas, resources, analysis, and reach conclusions in a time frame that means you can keep up with the news rather than having to rely on more bureaucratic processes and posting stuff out and compositing motions, which means you can't keep up. I think the final thing, though, is that one of the wonderful things about all these tools is they're so complementary to other older, more traditional forms of activism. So we saw with the Save Our Forests campaign the way that stuff that was happening offline and stuff that was happening online was so easy to complement each other, and the presence of a big online petition was something that we could use to stoke and seed and support offline groups organising rallies in their local areas. So what I'm really saying is I think we need to be really confident about saying, firstly, that it's about being good activists and doing good activism, not about the tools. And it's perfectly possible to do good activism online. But secondly, that there are particular exciting things that online activism can offer and bring to the table, which everyone, wherever we are in our organisation, needs to be sharing with their colleagues so that they understand the potential and they're looking to the tools to work in that way. So what I'd really hope that means is in future we can move beyond this debate about clicktivism or not, which I think often is one of the opportunities which that online organising can give is it opens up the field. It allows more people to get involved, more people to take part, and often the reaction to that, I think, has an element of either elitism or its kind of Marxist-Leninist equivalent of vanguardism. But these are people who don't know stuff, and what they're piling in, and they have ideas that aren't our ideas and are disrupting how we operate. I think that if we can move beyond the clicktivism, slacktivism debate, we could be focusing on some much more important and significant questions, which I would really love there to be debates on at future ECFs. And the kind of debate titles I think would be great to be talking about in the future are, what does it mean for our engagement with decision makers that more people can get involved with the process and can be contacting their decision maker? If we don't accept the kind of elitist premise that you have to earn the right to contact your decision maker by writing original prose with a quill pen or whatever, what is the way in which we engage with MPs, and how do we support that, or other decision makers? How does a new digitally enabled mass participation activism interact with existing institutions more generally, and with established NGOs? What does collaboration between NGOs look like in a digitally enabled sphere? How do we, if we think that digital tools have enabled activists to catch up with the 24-hour news cycle, how do NGOs catch up with the 24-hour news cycle as well, particularly in a collaborative space where traditionally coalitions take months to coalesce, and intricate negotiations about positions of logos and shared platforms? How does all that stuff catch up? How do we move from those kind of coalitions to flotillas that can keep up with events? So that's really my pitch. And there were some specific things raised about 38 Degrees, which I'd love to chat about in the kind of Q&A bit as well. But I really think we need to move beyond the collectivism debate and focus on the more concrete, more specific, but I think more fertile questions about how different forms of activism can coalesce and cooperate, and how we can therefore be more effective in actually ensuring that the activism, online or offline, is good activism.